All right, first of all, guys, I just want to say thanks for coming in today to this nutrition workshop. My name's Tony. For those of you that don't know me, I am the head coach of Crux Training, and we specialize in small group strength and conditioning, individualized to suit your individual needs and goals. So today we're going to talk about one of the four pillars of success. So we've got training, nutrition, mindset, and recovery. So I covered the training part, a bit of the mindset stuff as well, but we've got Hannah from All Body Services today, and she is going to talk all about nutrition. Okay, so if you've got any questions, guys, we're going to work through a few topics to start with, and then if you've got any questions, we'll hold them to the end. We'll have a bit of a Q&A at the end there, and I'm going to pass it over to Hannah.
Awesome, cool. Thanks. That's nice. Cool, yeah, so I'm Hannah. I'm a dietitian and I direct All Body Services. So we're a team of 3 at the moment. We've got 2 practitioners, me as a dietitian, and then Christina on Saturdays as a nutritionist. And then we've got Claire over in Perth, who does like all our recipes and resource development and stuff like that. So if you know recipes, she's amazing and we can get it to you. But yeah, so we specialise in sport and fitness. So we work with a lot of elite athletes as well as just recreational people just trying to get healthy. And then also like gut health, so IBS issues like bloating, that kind of stuff. And then just general weight management, body composition goals. So there are key 3 areas. But then other things outside of that as well. We're starting to branch into women's health a bit more. But today, I kind of just want to talk on 2 main topics. So number 1, probably like 2 key things that people tend to ask us, and Tony thought would be really important. Can you or how to build muscle and lose fat? So pretty much like body composition, how do we get leaner and stay strong? And then topic 2, how to get long-term results, as in like just keep your results sustainable. So you nail these things on page 1. It's like, how do you then not blow it all at the end of a challenge and you're like, yeah, blow out. So what goals do we have here though? So is anyone wanting to lose fat mass? Lose fat? Yeah, okay, cool. Is anyone wanting to gain muscle? Okay, so we've got a few like at the same time, sweet. And like, has anyone had like lots of success in the past with that? Cool. No, that's awesome, guys. That's sweet. Who's struggled, if you don't mind, if you're not afraid to put your hand up? Yeah? Me, most of my clients, most of us. It's really hard, and it's hard to keep it off and keep it sustainable because I guess we talk about energy deficits, energy surpluses in terms of maths and put into science, but then life is like up and down, and so it's then how do you actually apply that through life? So that's kind of, I guess, what the second part is going to help give you some concepts and ideas to help with that. But honestly, I think that's a lot of like our coaching services. It's riding with you in those times. So it's hard to put it into a workshop, but we'll talk about it. The first page though, let's get to that because I think you'll find that really interesting. How much have you guys kind of heard about like the process of weight loss and the process of gaining muscle? Like, or this is really broad, see how we go. What have you guys heard about it? Any key things or anything you know about how to lose weight? Yeah, super key word. Yeah. And what's your idea about like losing weight and gaining muscle at the same time? There's so many mixed opinions and actually like it's not that straightforward. So what have you guys heard about that? Difficult, can't do it. Yeah. High protein, yeah, there's some hints on here. And what about like how to build muscle? Again, that's anything you guys have heard about that? This is just helping me figure out where to start. Yeah. Hit the big guns. Yeah. Sam's. Not what I would recommend. All right, so on the first page, it gives you a little bit of a, I don't know what you'd call it, like a spectrum kind of thing of, you've got anabolic, which is basically your body's in building mode. So you're in a calorie surplus a lot of the time to gain weight. That weight could be muscle or it could be fat. And that depends on, again, a range of factors. Down on the other end, you're in a catabolic state. So that's a calorie deficit. You're eating less calories than what your body's just burning through the day. And that results in weight loss. But that could also be muscle or that could be fat. And again, it depends on a range of factors. So I'm assuming most of you aren't wanting to put on fat and aren't wanting to lose muscle. That's kind of what we want to avoid. In the middle here is weight maintenance. And so that's there where your calories that are coming in through food are balancing what you're burning through the day in exercise and just life in general. So the big topic of can you build muscle and lose fat will depend pretty much on how your body responds to some of these factors that I've listed here. So if you're new to training, that would be one of the big things that I would first touch on. If you're new, you probably actually can because your body is just like, holy moly, what the heck is this stress that Tony's just put me under? And it's usually going to react quite well. And then if you're you've been training for ages, then your body's a bit more efficient with those processes and it actually struggles then to lose fat and build muscle at the same time. So that's when you really need to hone in on some of the other strategies there. But if you're new to training, it's kind of, you got it good. And then you got to hold on for later. The second thing is you need to make sure that you've actually got a really good program. So whatever nutrition strategies that we'll talk about, honestly, your program and your training, that's the stimulus to grow muscle. The nutrition then supports that by giving you all the building blocks. So if you've got a really good program, maybe you can again, but it does get harder than if you're still not a new athlete or a new in training. So basically, if you are new to training, could potentially do it. Otherwise, if you're not, we might then have to split it between a calorie deficit where you might lose your fat mass and then go into a surplus, or we could go into a surplus first and then go into a deficit and kind of lose the fat that you've done, that you may have gained in a surplus. So has anyone tried to lose weight before? And do you reckon, did you guys go in a huge deficit or a small deficit? What was your experience of losing weight in the past? If anyone's
Huge
okay.
deficit.
Huge deficit. Yeah, okay. How did that feel?
Horrible.
Horrible, yeah, okay. Yeah.
I was new to training with Tony 7 years ago or something.
Yeah.
The results were ridiculous.
Yeah, yeah.
At the same time, but I wouldn't recommend it ever again.
Yeah. And do you know if you lost much muscle or if it was all fat?
I looked amazing at the time.
Yeah, yeah. So lean.
I looked amazing, but I don't
Yeah.
recommend it. My mental health suffered real bad.
Yeah. And if you do go too low too, you can go into more of a starvation mode and then your whole brain chemistry can change as well. So that's a really tough one. Usually what I find if we're then choosing to go into a deficit, I recommend quite a small deficit. So it might be more around you aim for half a kilo loss per week, which is around a 500 calorie deficit. Because then, again, with other dietary factors and with training, we're usually able to then actually maintain, probably not build, but maintain your muscle mass through that. Usually if you go into a huge deficit, that's when your body's like, whoa, I need to burn other tissues as well because you're probably depleting your carbs and everything too. So it might break down some proteins there. And that's where you might lose a little bit of muscle mass at the same time as fat mass. So would not recommend or starving or juice cleanses or a lot of those real fad diets. There's huge deficits and usually not then supporting actually maintaining your muscle mass. And besides just feeling super crappy, one of the key things there is that your muscle mass is actually your metabolically active tissue. And so that then means that that's actually the stuff that's burning through the calories. So when you go on fad diets or yo-yo dieting or all of that, then your body loses its muscle mass and then it pretty much has to keep eating like a little birdie even just to maintain weight because you've lost a lot of that metabolically active tissue. So small deficit if you want to do that. 500 calories, what I'd recommend. Still on the energy balance then, if we were looking to build muscle, so again, we're pretty experienced with training, we're wanting to build muscle, I would then recommend a small surplus, so then we don't gain too much fat mass either. This one, again, you've got to be really quite tight on, and I'd do skin folds to measure it and actually track your progress, or some other kind of DEXA scan or something. And I would do a 250 kilocalorie or calorie surplus. For this one. So it's just a little bit and you've got to allow plenty of time for it as well. If you try and do a quick, it depends on how much you want to gain. So it might be a kilo across a month. kind of thing of muscle that you would gain would be my recommendation. And even then,
Sorry, just on your, like you said, like do a slow deficit, and you said like 250 to 500 calories. So when I did mine, it was like I dropped maybe like 50 to 100 calories per week and did that over like 6 months.
Yeah.
And then I sort of like went up, like 100 calories drop a week, and then did the same thing, 100 calories back a week, 100 calories off. And I did that for 6 months and it worked really well. But like, what's your opinion on that? Like dropping?
So you were calorie cycling. You were doing like maintenance and then a deficit, and deficit. Yeah. There's actually, for a while there wasn't much evidence around doing that approach, but more recently there's been a few studies that have looked at that, and they found that you can actually lose more weight. Obviously it's slowed. It's like slower than if you were to just do it, but you can lose more weight because your body doesn't adapt as much. Whereas when you're in a deficit, so even a 500 calorie deficit, which is what I usually recommend, your body is still going to adapt to that. And so like hormones, so for example, like your thyroid hormones slow and stuff, which means that your BMR or your metabolism slows too. So whereas when you kind of go maintenance deficit, your body doesn't get the chance to adapt as much. So yeah, there's evidence. It depends how much weight you want to lose though. If you have a lot to lose, then that makes sense. You have to then allow your body to find a way to lose that weight. Whereas if it's only a few kilos, I would just kind of get it over and done with and do the half a kilo a week. So again, it's context. Nutrition is seriously, it's all context, which is why it's confusing when you like read things online and you're just like, but they said that kind of makes sense. And it depends on the person. But yeah, there's evidence for it.
Okay, cool.
Cool. Any other questions on a deficit? Or at least the calorie side of it? Cool. Cool. And then so surplus is just, again, a small calorie surplus definitely makes it easier because you've actually got the energy then for your body to build the muscle. In terms of then protein is probably the next important thing. So we've got training, we've got surplus, so we've got energy balance, and then we've got your protein intake. So what do you guys know about protein? Again, just throw some things out there for me.
Helps build muscle mass.
Yeah.
Makes your farts smell really bad.
If you're eating a lot of it and whey protein, not great. It can actually change the gut bacteria in your gut. Yeah, bacteria in your gut. Yeah, pretty nuts. Very true. So proteins are essentially just like chains of amino acids, and then that gets broken down in your body. Your body stores those amino acids and then builds them up in all different kind of ways. So it's not just used in muscle, it's used in tendons, in bones, in enzymes. So literally every cell interaction in your body is pretty much using proteins. Skin, hair, nails, like all of that stuff as well.
Vaccine?
Yeah, probably. Yeah. Not sure if that applies here, but yeah. But like seriously, proteins are really diverse and they're not just muscle. But for this purpose, to build muscle, we do need quite a bit of them. So we usually want to be in a protein surplus because again, if your body is either in a deficit, in a catabolic state, we need more protein because your body's going to chew through some of that to burn as energy. Or if we're in an anabolic state, we then need more to actually then build it above just then repairing all the damage you're doing in your sessions too. So you do need significant amounts, but what really matters is actually how that protein is distributed across the day. So I don't know if you guys have ever heard of an amino acid called leucine. Yeah, who has heard of it? Leucine? It's leucine. Yeah, no, that's not one. Leucine. It's one of the branched chain amino acids, and they've got a lot of hype, like in the bro science supplement industry lately. But what it does is it triggers muscle protein synthesis. So it triggers your muscles into kind of being like, whoop, let's build a little bit more protein here. And it does that roughly every 3 to 4 hours. So what you need then is a little bit of leucine coming in every 3 to 4 hours to then trigger your muscles into kind of building up. And then they're like, sweet, we've got fresh protein, let's do it. But what happens if you just took BCAAs or if you just took a leucine protein supplement, it would only trigger it, but then you have no building blocks to then actually build the muscle. So that's why I don't actually recommend BCAAs They do trigger it, and then the body's like, what do I do? Where's actually my building blocks? What's better is actually eating food and eating protein every 3 to 4 hours, because then you're getting the trigger, but then you're getting all those little bricks that are actually going to help you build the wall.
Recommendation for if you do like a heavy weight session, have BCAAs during and then a protein shake just after. Does it go trigger then you have the building blocks? Or the protein shake beforehand?
Wouldn't even bother about the BCAAs. Yeah, it's really hard. Like, they're hyped up so much and it's really confusing, but the protein shake in itself will have enough leucine to do the trigger. Yeah. And honestly, like, even above a protein shake, if you could get in food, if you could get in milk or a yogurt to the right amounts of protein, that would be even better. Because what we're finding is we're comparing food, for example, like eggs or milk, to isolated protein like a whey protein or a casein protein, which is just one type. Then we're finding that there's other components of food that we actually don't know enough about yet, but that actually facilitates like a better result within the body when it comes to muscle growth as well as different health markers too. So yeah.
We're looking at endurance. I'm starting to get into racing and mountain biking. So beforehand, obviously, you try and get as much protein as possible so you've got fuel. What about during the ride? So if you're looking at 5 hours of riding, what's the recommendation of energy or protein to keep yourself going without burning yourself?
I'd go for carbs. So one of my guys is an endurance mountain biker. So like, I don't know if that's similar to you, but like 5 hour kind of like practice rides and stuff like that. And it's all about getting carbs in for that, because that's the major fuel that you're using when you're trying to go at intensity, which even if you're not pushing super hard, is still using a decent amount of carbs.
Any carbs okay? Like, you don't want you're not going to be fueled purely on snakes.
Well, it's actually in that instance, probably won't want to purely snakes because you'd get flavour fatigue and you just couldn't stomach them. But it's still fuel in that sense.
Okay.
Outside of the ride, I'd be looking at more high quality carbs and getting the fibre in and getting other nutrients in. But in the ride, it's actually just all about like, how do we get the carbs in? So what we want to aim for in a 5 hour ride would probably be like 70 to 90 grams of carbs per hour. So it takes a lot of planning and building up to get to that. Like, I wouldn't expect your stomach to be able to tolerate that at the start. But that's quite specific sports nutrition. A bit separate to this, but an area that I actually love. So if you have more questions on that, I think after, like, hit me up, because it's super interesting. Protein, definitely afterwards, and still for you, you'd need your protein every, like, scattered around. You probably can't get it the 4 hours then because it's a 5 hour ride. So you do want it before, you want it after, and then you want it still regularly through the day. But your body's not going to use protein as fuel for those type of sessions. Yeah.
Is there a certain amount of protein, if you had it in one sitting, that it's basically just waste because you've had too much?
Yeah, that's actually a really interesting one, and I think because of the whole thing with the leucine trigger, we talk a lot about 20 to 30 grams of protein as being all your body needs, and that kind of equates to 0.4 grams of protein per kilo of your body weight that I try to get in every 4 hours. So it equals around 1.6 grams of protein per kilo of your body weight across a day. But in saying that, because protein's used for more than just triggering muscle growth, your body is not going to waste that protein. It's still going to store it, and your bodies can use it for your hair, nails, enzymes, like all those other processes too. So if you're having 60 grams of protein as a meal, it's not like you'll then pee it out. Your body will use it as fuel or for other things, but you just don't need it. Like, you might as well then use carbs as fuel because they're more efficient. They use less oxygen to break down. You can break them down faster. So they're a really great source. Or fats, where then you can actually get more omega-3s in with your energy budget, which is seriously important for everything. Yeah.
Is there a better source of protein? I think it sounds like you're suggesting more whole foods rather than just taking shakes and things like that.
Yeah, and that's again because the evidence is supporting all those other different food interactions that we actually just don't know about in science. We just know there's a thing. So I think whole foods are good. This is a bit, for ethical reasons, a bit debated, I guess, but in terms of like for sports nutrition and for building muscle and fitness goals, animal proteins are better. They're usually complete profiles of amino acids, so you're getting all those building blocks within one food. And they're usually more bioavailable, so they're actually digested and broken down a little easier than in the body. But if you're vegetarian or if you're plant-based, we can still make it work. You just got to choose combinations of food and maybe actually eat a little bit more, or quite significantly more, but it's very doable. Yeah, and it's good for your gut.
What if you're mixing like a protein powder in with food? Does that sort of like change processes or?
Yeah, I mean, protein powders, yeah, I actually don't know. And I think because the whole food first thing, it's a thing we know happens, but we don't know much about it. I don't know, yeah.
The fact that you would be eating food like at the same time, though,
Yeah, I think if you can say if you have like, half a scoop of whey protein on milk, then you're still getting more protein from milk and you may be getting a bit of vitamin D, you might be getting a bit of calcium and, I don't know, fats and stuff like that. And all of that, I think, helps use the protein somehow. So I think if that's an option, do it. Where you use supplements, I'm not against supplements. It's like if you can't get food in, use a supplement because you still then are getting a better result than having nothing. So it's like, I'm not against it, it's just don't rely on it for every bout of protein. Plus eating chicken's a little nicer than downing a whey protein shake.
Yeah, but chicken and chocolate protein shakes too is really yummy.
That's what you're thinking of, like protein and the food together. You're like, oh, that's what I'll do. No. Yeah, no. Yeah, protein's a super, super interesting one, actually. There's a really cool podcast on muscle building that I could even send through to Tony. It's quite science-based, like he's interviewing like researchers in the field, but if you're into that stuff, I've got a few ones that I can send through to you guys too. Oh, if you want to like get caught and never participate in your sport again. I guess like we've kind of branched away from this anyways, but in general, any questions about body composition, we can even just touch on that, like supplements or, yeah.
Question that a lot of people ask is fasted cardio versus and like intermittent fasting. What are your thoughts on that in terms of weight loss, fat loss, building muscle?
So basically with intermittent fasting, there's nothing like special about it. It's just a strict way of cutting out calories. Because if you're not eating breakfast, there's like 300 to 500 calories, just 600 calories, like just gone there for your day. If you're then making that up in your little window, then you're not going to lose weight because it's still about a calorie balance. Men too tend to respond better from a hormonal perspective too. I can't remember the mechanisms. I read about it and I just remember the general gist. But women, I wouldn't recommend women intermittent fast. It's with our hormones, something changes and then it actually leads to potentially more like adipose tissue, fat tissue around our bellies too. So not really what we want from intermittent fasting. Then with the context of even if you are a guy and you're looking at fasting, then look at when you're training. If fasting is going to happen around the same time as you're training, you're probably going to feel super crappy and not adapt and probably get injured after your training as well. So I would still try and fuel up for those sessions, recover from those sessions, and then restrict calories outside of that time, potentially like at dinner or later in the day where they're less essential. So if you can fuel up, you're usually going to train harder, potentially burn more calories, restrict later, and then that deficit across the day is actually going to be larger if you fuel than if you fasted but then ate all those calories later. Does that make sense?
Hell yeah.
Yeah. There's a thing though called like fat adaptation. So again, for like endurance athletes, probably wouldn't like work for most of you, but if you are doing like super long endurance events and your body in your race or whatever, you can't actually take in enough carbs to sustain that event, then you can train your body to use fats a bit more efficiently, and that's where you might then look at fasting, but you still want to recover. You then don't want to like fast till the midday and then not recover properly, so you still need enough calories. But anyway, that's a separate issue again. But yeah, a lot of people ask about fasting, so men not around training and just not women, sorry.
And then on that topic, if you're training in the mornings versus training at the night, so obviously if you train at night, you've had all this food throughout the day, so you've got all this extra energy. So if you're training in the mornings, how would you change or how would you adapt your nutrition if you don't want to have this massive meal, like, 5 o'clock in the morning?
Yeah. Yeah, it's really tough. And I think the key thing there to go for is your carbs. And you might even just go for like really easy to digest, really simple carbs. I often recommend either even just fruit juice. Have a little bit of fruit juice before you train. Medjool dates. Have you guys like super caramelly? They're amazing. Or a banana. Or even like little, like those little snack packs of sultanas that you might have had like as kids in your little lunch boxes. So easy to eat, so good. There's only about 30 grams of carbs in there, and usually the ideal thing would be like 1 gram of carbohydrates per kilo of your body weight before a training session, but it's something. And it really depends on how hard you're training and what that training session looks like too, because if it's less than 60 minutes, even having a little bit of that fruit juice, even on your tongue, even if you spat it out, that then actually connects with the glucose receptors, sends signals to your brain, and your brain's like, sweet, we've got energy, let's go. And you can, and when they've done studies with that, they found that like people that did that versus didn't, their strength in the session pretty much went up, like their 1RMs went up. And I think there's been like, so strength went up and then potentially, yeah, something else as well.
You kind of started with something like lemon water before a workout?
I don't know. I don't know how much carbs or sugars there actually are in lemon water. Maybe if you did like lemon cordial. Yeah, I don't know if there'd be enough sugar in there to do that, but you give it a try, experiment. Yeah, I usually use fruit juice or like a cordial or something if people can stomach it.
Is there a quality measure with that? Like, I can't eat in the morning anything, period. And in particular, if I'm going to be doing a training session, and it was becoming a problem, so I ended up, off of suggestions, getting some Powerade powder and using that, but then it made my poop go green, so I didn't like that. So yeah, I kind of looked at the ingredients there, and then I started looking around online to find a quality, hydration supplement, and I found one that it doesn't have like Powerade had like dextrose and some stuff in it. This has got pure glucose and fructose. So is there like a quality difference with the sweetener or the sugar type?
Nah, I wouldn't say so. Yeah, it's all simple sugars, and that's the stuff that like people worry about when they like high GI, so they spike your blood glucose levels, and then if you were to do that constantly through the day, that would be an issue and potentially lead to insulin resistance and diabetes and like metabolic disease basically. But prior to a training session, whatever simple sugars you use, spike your blood glucose levels is exactly what then your body's going to draw on to fuel that training session. So basically carbohydrates are made up of like little sugar kind of chains. Your body then cleaves that, and it's just then uses that sugar molecule to fuel its session. So fructose and glucose I think are both like two little sugar things together. Dextrose I'm not super sure, but the body just cleaves it all anyways. Yeah. But it's different throughout the day than you want quality food.
Yeah. So I mean, I only do it in the morning.
Yeah.
Freaky with it, but
Yeah. I think whatever sits well too. There's different receptors for different sugars in your gut. And so sometimes even to like, you have to train your gut to digest food sometimes, because some people it adapts. Like the more you fuel with carbohydrates before a session or during like a big long ride, your body produces more of those receptors because it's like, oh, we're getting fuel with this. Yeah.
If you're trying to lose fat, would you say don't have sugars before training then? Like, does your body draw on the sugar for that energy during training rather than burning fat?
Yeah, really good question, and probably Tony was hinting at that in his question, which I didn't actually answer. But basically losing fat is going to be about the energy deficit across the day. So in the session, yes, your body will be drawing on its fat stores, but because fat is actually really hard for the body to break down, it uses a lot more oxygen. It's quite slow, so that means your session generally like slows down. And then you'll burn less calories because you're not working as hard just because of the type of fuel source you're drawing on. Whereas if you draw on carbohydrates, they break down a lot faster, and so you can actually use more energy because you can work harder. But then if you then restrict calories later on in the day where you're less active, your body is still in that deficit because it's calorie restricted. So then your body still needs to draw on something. It doesn't have those carbohydrates or that fuel available. So it taps into its fat stores at that point then. But it doesn't affect your performance because you don't have to do any high intensity activity. It's just chilling. So you can burn fats nice and slowly, and it doesn't really affect your performance. So I would still fuel up those sessions with sugars and carbohydrates, recover with carbohydrates and protein, get the most out of that, build the muscle from that session, and then create that deficit later on the day, and that's where your body will will tap into its fat stores. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so basically still carry on as is, and then just maybe, so would you say do that, but then try and don't eat a massive dinner later that night?
Yeah, lunch, dinner. Yeah, if it's been early, you refuel with breakfast. You might have a morning snack, and then you can have a smaller lunch, no afternoon snack, depending on what hunger levels are like, and then smaller dinner kind of thing. Yeah.
So going off that question, so if we are using carbs to fuel our sessions, would you recommend having less carbs on days where you don't train?
Yeah, this is actually another really interesting one where the research kind of doesn't favour one or the other. So you could look at your average across a week. So your average energy requirements for that week and just kind of have a deficit on that. So some days you might be in more of a deficit than others, and you might be more hungry than others. Or you could look at specific days and really like try and tweak your intake to those specific days. I would say that if you are training really, really hard and there's some super insane days like 5-hour rides, or there's some really chill days where you might go for a recovery walk or something, I probably would tweak it to the specific days. So on the recovery days, you would have less than the other ones. Because from a carbohydrate availability perspective, that can actually really impact recovery even from like bones, tendons, like injury perspective. And so if you're not having enough carbs around those huge sessions, you're more likely to get injured. So if you're just kind of training regularly and it's maybe like a half hour to an hour session on those other days, I reckon you could just go for the average, and that's easier to manage. But if there's real big differences, I would try and tweak it so that you're fueled and then deficit, fueled, deficit. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And then I guess it comes down to also the recovery as well. Like if you're using food to speed up the recovery process, is that where you like would try to maintain the same amount of calories like day in, day out, like over a week?
Sorry, repeat that?
So for example, if you were training on like a Monday, Wednesday, Friday.
Yeah.
Tuesday and Thursdays are your days off.
Yeah.
Would you keep the same amount of calories to speed up to aid in the recovery process, or would you?
Yeah, and that's the benefit of potentially keeping it the same. Yeah. So, but it depends if you want to be in maintenance or if you want to be in a deficit. If you want to be in maintenance, it's easy to have enough recovery fuel because you're recovering and replenishing everything you've burned. If you want to be in a deficit, it's obviously suboptimal, and that's why I don't recommend deficits unless you're like super keen, or unless you know what's happening or in optimal time of your season or whatever, because it will be restricting somewhere, and that deficits do increase your risk of injury because either you're not fueling up properly or you're not recovering properly. But that's the whole thing. Again, we want to keep protein nice and high. We want to distribute that well. So at least you've got the building blocks there, and then carbohydrates around your sessions. So you're still recovering with carbohydrates, but the other meals might be slightly restricted with carbs, which you will still limit your recovery from that session a little bit, but at least it's minimized. If you weren't to recover and you weren't to fuel, then that would be bad. Yeah.
When you refer to restrictive carbs on your day off, you referenced a gram per kilo. On your days off, do you cut that in half? Like half a gram per kilo, or do you just
yeah. So that's kind of specific to fueling up for the sessions, and that the range there, it depends on so many factors, and it actually ranges in the research from like 1 gram per kilo to like 4 grams per kilo of your body weight. But in terms of like total carbs across the day, I probably couldn't even give you a guide because it depends on what you're doing, and I don't know your specific training. General fitness, maybe it's around like 4 grams per kilo, but during the day in total. But yeah, but you would restrict it. Yeah, it would go down. Yeah, was your main question. Sorry. Yeah.
How does your body type, so the ectomorphs and endomorphs, impact your ability to meet your goals? So if you are trying to lose weight, gain muscle?
I would say it probably, I don't look specifically at body types because I know some people have looked at that and then given macro distributions for that. There's probably not much evidence for that approach. I think they've summarized things maybe a bit and made it a bit too simplistic. I think I'd look at the reasons for different body shapes. So, or what that means if you have different body shapes. So if, I can't even remember the different types, but if you're holding more fat mass and less muscle mass, then you've got less of that metabolically active tissue. So maybe your calories are a little bit lower. You could consider that. Yeah, I don't specifically work in that sense. I know people do, but I don't think the evidence is there. Or if, or if you are holding more fat mass, is it because of some like hormonal kind of things? Like if you actually just struggle, like sometimes it's genetics, but usually there's reasons too of like different hormones too, or like PCOS or lower testosterone or high testosterone too. So that can affect like why you build muscle really quickly or why you don't build muscle, which again is, we'll scrunch this up, but on the first page there, some of it is highlighted in the what makes it easier to build muscle, what makes it harder. And the idea with that, which I totally didn't do, which is fine, was to kind of have a look at what does make it harder and kind of pick where you guys might sit, and then that just might help you to have more realistic expectations with your goals and plan out where you, anyway, yeah, blabbering on a bit there, I'm not really sure what I'm saying, yeah.
Is there any difference between having like smaller, more frequent meals as opposed to like fewer but obviously larger?
With protein there is. So again, for that 0.4 grams of protein per kilo body weight to stimulate that muscle mass, build that up to the max level, that means 4 meals a day pretty much to get to your 1.6 grams across the day. So 4 meals a day I'd say is great to get muscle mass. As far as weight loss goes, they've done studies and they've had like 3 meals a day versus 5 meals a day, and there's no difference. There's a little bit of difference when it comes to like the thermic effect of food, but like as far as like energy expenditure goes, thermic effect of food is such like the tiniest little thing that it doesn't really affect actual results. It's kind of like one of those lab concepts versus actually like in the real world what actually helps. So whatever's comfortable, but I'd try and eat 4 meals a day with protein.
Just building on Alex's question, 4 meals a day when? So me and Alex train predominantly in the evenings. Saturday we train in the mornings, but predominantly in the night. So, do you recommend when you kind of have those 4 meals? Is it breakfast, second breakfast, lunch, then dinner?
Yeah. I again just think 4 hours between them. So it could be dinner. If your goals, dinner and then afternoon snack, lunch, early lunch, breakfast. Or some clients, I actually give 2 lunches. So no snacks, 2 lunches. It depends again on so many factors. If you're trying to build muscle, you could almost have like 5 meals a day, and there's evidence for having 2 protein serves in the evening to help you build muscle too. So it's like dinner, and then you might have like a protein dessert right before bed, because obviously then you go through that bit of a fast. So building up those amino acids can actually be helpful before you go through that fast as well.
What is an example of a protein dessert?
Casein pudding, yeah.
That's what I was on to. Okay.
Your whey and chicken.
Yep.
Cottage cheese on toast, smoothies, yogurt, like those high protein yogurts. Protein chia pudding. True Protein does like some high protein chocolate puddings and stuff, I'm pretty sure, or custards. You could do that, yeah. Oh, it's not great? Really? I haven't tried it. My clients love it, so I've been like recommending it. That's so funny. Did you have a question too?
Yeah, so during the process of an injury, would your carbs and your protein that you've carried on from pre-injury, during the injury and post-injury, would that sort of speed up or help with the rehab?
Yeah, absolutely. So with the injury, you actually require more calories, say at baseline. Like obviously not training as much, so you take that out. But at baseline, your body is like, I need to heal this, so I need to put building blocks to actually help. So actually having enough fuel and aiming for maintenance versus a deficit is really important. A lot of clients are like, I'm not training. So they cut all their fuel out, have no carbs, and obviously then there's no building blocks or energy to actually help with the injury. So I would just try and maintain weight across that period, and then as exercise steps up, increase your carbs again. But what you want through injury is pretty much, protein just stays the same. Like protein never changes. Sometimes you might even have higher protein, and in the case of injury or a deficit, you might even benefit from higher protein than maintaining as well. And again, regular through the day. Some supplements can help with injury. Omega-3s in the very acute stage. So if you're not mobile or not moving for some reason, omega-3s might actually help attenuate muscle loss. But beyond that, they don't. Once you start moving and eating protein again, they don't do anything. And then collagen potentially as well with vitamin C.
How important is consuming fat? Because the idea of fat is bad, and then I realized that I don't actually eat a lot of fat in my day-to-day diet to begin with. But is it important to actually consume fats? Do I have to go out of my way to okay, yes, put some butter on your bread, or eat some salmon?
Yeah, no, fat's important. All the macronutrients, all the nutrients are important. All food groups are important. And fats, but it all needs to fit within your energy budget. So the reason why fats get a bad rap is because they're quite calorie dense. So say you isolate a gram of carbohydrates, you isolate a gram of protein, fats and alcohol. Carbohydrates and protein have around 17 kilojoules per that gram. Fats have around 37 kilojoules and alcohol 29. So it's fats have a lot more energy in one little gram than, so you have a little bit of butter that could equal the same calories as you might get in a piece of bread. So people are go low fat because it saves a lot of calories. And if you add lots of fats, it very quickly might top over your calorie budget. So you do need to be aware of them. But from a metabolic and a hormonal perspective, obviously they're so important. So every cell in your body is pretty much encapsulated by this lipid, fat coating. And then the fats in that can actually change how your cell interacts with things. So that's why omega-3s, or this is a theory, this is also being debated, nutrition science, that the reason why omega-3s might actually have such an important role in the body is that they then get inserted into that little capsule around the cell, and then it's just not a stagnant capsule, it interacts with everything, and that seems to be something that helps. So choosing your fats wisely, I think, is important. And again, all the debate around saturated trans, monounsaturated omega-3s is really a bit of a hot topic, but I think we know that more plant-based fats besides coconut oil are really good, and fish is really good for you. So
what's wrong with coconut oil? Have you seen those Tom and Simon boys?
What do you mean? Well, yeah, I don't know. It's pretty debated. It's kind of one of those things where I don't think there's enough research for me to be yeah, actually it's awesome, or it's really bad. It's a saturated fat, but it is a shorter chain saturated fat, and it may interact differently, in metabolic wise, than other ones. But anecdotally, I've found people that have gone vegan and had a lot of saturated fats, or even gone to live over in the islands where they have a lot of coconut, has actually come back with high cholesterol. So I kind of stand by simply anecdotal evidence that maybe I wouldn't recommend it. But what we know, and really strong with the evidence, is again, omega-3s are kind of the ones to aim for, and all your plant-based fats are quite high in them.
It's just if you grew up on coconut, you're fine.
It's something in the genes. Yeah, I couldn't tell you.
Okay, everybody lives in a real world. We all love a little bit of a treat here and there. I had 2 Jack Daniels last night. Obviously you can't say that everyone's perfect, and we all do that sort of stuff. We all go out and have a dinner that may be more or less than what we actually are doing. What's your take on that? How would you work around something that, a birthday comes up, there's going to be cake, there's going to be a party, there's going to be beer, you know what I mean?
Honestly, I wouldn't even have a problem with it. I think it's depends on your goals too, and if you're wanting to lose weight and you need to be in a strict deficit, you might get a bit more strict around those things. But if you're wanting to just kind of change body composition, be the healthiest you, a meal a week or a couple of meals a week that aren't kind of fitting that optimal gold standard diet, is that really going to impact your long-term health? Like for the 80, 90 years of life, you know, a couple of meals, like no. And like on the last page, which we again haven't really spoken through, I think of things too as like a bit of a pendulum. Like if you do restrict way too much, you go on some crazy challenge and you're like, I'm only eating clean, whatever that means. You're restricting way over here. What happens when suddenly life hits and you don't have that same level of discipline or determination, or your goals change? That pendulum's going to swing way back the other way. And usually that then leads to binging and just your body being like, give me the food. And often if you are eating clean, you're often not actually meeting your body's requirements as well. You're usually in a restrictive kind of zone. And that can then upregulate all your hunger cues as well. So then you're more likely to, again, swing the other way. So I think including some of those just part of that life and balance. And so food's more than just fuel too. We've spoken about the science and the nutrition behind it, but like it's social, it's cultural, it's like so many things, and that's really important. So yeah, I don't have a problem in short summary. Yeah.
How long's too long for a deficit?
Oh.
You mentioned, you know, it's like long-term dieting does work against you in the end.
Yeah.
Like, is there an optimal cut-off point, or is it going to depend on the person, or how much you want to lose?
Good question. Like I'm sure there's stuff in research, again, kind of that whole thing of like your hormones kind of can be affected, but that's even shown after a few days. And I'm like, well, to get results, it has to be longer than a few days. And it does depend on how steep the deficit is as well. So I don't know, I monitor it with clients. Thanks so much, guys. I monitor it with clients and kind of treat it on a client-to-client level. I think if you're doing it yourself, honestly, I think if you're going in deficit, you really should be under someone, whether that's on a Tony or a dietitian. You should be externally accountable, because we can get very carried away with seeing weight loss happen, and it's really exciting. Maybe 6 months, but that's literally me being like, pull something out of the air. I think you're going to need to watch your energy levels. You need to watch whether you're getting sick, whether you're getting little injury niggles, whether weight loss is starting to slow down as well. And then you might do something, and what Michaela kind of did, and you go into like a maintenance. You bring in more calories. You might do that for another couple of months or a month or so, and then you can bring it back down if there's still more weight to lose. But also even like more like psychological factors too, of just like what's happening with your relationship with food and your relationship with your body and your relationship with other people. Is some of that starting to be affected as well? Because like that's just as important as physiologically what's happening. So yeah, deficits aren't ideal, but obviously, you know, we all want to get leaner pretty much is everyone's goal. Yeah. So it didn't answer you very well.
No.
Blabbered a little bit again. Yeah. Yeah, and people even respond to like different amounts of calories. Like you have calculations, they're all done in like super insanely lean men. So they're not even representative of half of us. And a lot of like working out like a deficit and stuff is still all tracking. And so sometimes you might be in a deficit, then life hits, and then you might not be. So it's also like for 6 months, you'll very rarely be all those months, all those days in the deficit too. You'll have times where you fluctuate. So it is, yeah, I don't think I have an answer.
So all this talk about like, you know, calorie deficits, I think the idea is that you really just want to look leaner. I've heard like people say, specifically bodybuilders, which is, you know, I don't want to listen to them really sometimes. But like, you know, they say like, oh, you know, you want to look leaner, not necessarily lose weight, but to look leaner, maybe have you thought of you're just not eating enough? And then it's just like, you know, bodybuilders eat a whole lot and they look so lean. I was just like, is that a real thing? Do I need to eat more? Am I just not eating enough? And that's why I don't look as lean as I want to be.
Yeah, I think that's another concept that's been really oversimplified. I mean, bodybuilders go through like years of building muscle where they do put on a bit of fat mass with that surplus. And then they'll go through like a period of 12 weeks or something and like go in stupid deficits till they're like sick on stage. So they do definitely build and cut, and they just go through that same cycle. What people sometimes like are thinking of when they're talking about not eating enough too is like if you have been restricting your whole life, and by like the long-term thing, I'm thinking of like people who have been yo-yo dieting like their entire life, and so then like, yeah, restrict and then binge, And then that whole thing, they like lose muscle mass, and so they have to eat like a little bird just to maintain. So they're eating 1,200 calories but not changing. So then I'd be like, all right, let's eat a little bit more here and let's try and build your muscle mass, build up that metabolism. Those hormones that have now kind of slowed and everything's adapted to then conserve energy. Let's give your body fuel so it doesn't feel like it has to conserve anymore. And then that can definitely change your body composition because you're building muscle that's starting to like poke through, and then your body's then actually being like, oh, we're getting energy, we don't have to like go into starvation mode and conserve this. So it then lets it go a little bit as well, and the body allows it to tap into its fat stores and burn them because it's not afraid that it will never get to eat again. So that's definitely a thing, but I think if you just go around and say like eat more, but there's not this training stimulus there, or you don't have that history, the body's got to store it somewhere, and so it's either going to store it as muscle or it's either going to store it as fat if you're in a surplus. If you're eating to maintenance from a deficit, then you can, again, change body composition slowly. Yeah, I hope that answered. I hope that made sense.
We're going to get about a few more minutes left, guys. If there's any other questions.
I have one. So if you're working with a client, how does your program look? Like, are you giving them an actual meal plan, or are you giving them a calorie limit? Like, how do you work that?
Yeah, so it's individual, but we at the start we do follow a general process. So we pretty much have you in for an assessment session, and so that's an hour initial, and it gives us the chance to ask pretty much all the questions, because I guess as you guys got the picture, nutrition's pretty individual and there's a lot of context involved. So we get you in for that. From all of that, then we've got all the data then that we need to pretty much form a meal plan for you. I don't like the idea of diets. I like the idea that it's a process that you learn from, and I think having a meal plan is a really cool tool for you to then look at, have a base to then we can build on that based on then how your body responds. So I like pairing a meal plan with like an intuitive listening to your body, because your body knows so much. And like I said, we have the meal plan, but it's based on like calculations that are done among like men in the military kind of thing. So it's like, okay, this is our base. And then that is pretty much for each meal, we've got like option A, option B, option C. I've calculated them all out. Often I'll give the macros for those, depending on if you're interested. And then we've got a flexible option, and that flexible option is just like, okay, here's number of protein serves, number of carb serves, number of fats. And then down the bottom, there's a table that says these are the protein serves and protein options. That might be like high protein yogurt, 100 grams of meat, 100 grams of da-da-da. And then you can kind of build your own meal. So it's like options if you don't want to think, or you can kind of plan around the portions. And then I've got a calorie guide. So you could track, there's so many ways you could work the one plan. And then we do that for each meal. Then we have fuel around training too. So if you're training in the afternoon or the morning, you just kind of have that fuel and you smush it wherever you've trained. And then again, we can tweak those portions too based on what the day looks like. So it might have the options, and it might have like a heavy training day, or specifically a Monday or a Sunday, have more here at lunch kind of thing. So I don't know if I explained that very well. I struggle to explain it without a visual, but if you want me to email you an example, cool. And then we do that, we go through that together in the first review. So after the initial, week later, we get you back in. After that, I like to touch base fortnightly, but again, we kind of figure out that big overview plan in that first session together. We can tweak, we can track your body composition, we can do skin folds, we can chat. If you're struggling with that like more emotional side, emotional eating, we can look more into the intuitive eating, do some diaries with that. There's a bunch of activities then we do further on, and it's all about processes and updating the plan and moving you forward so you can adapt your own nutrition without me, essentially. It's like, my goal is to get you not seeing me. But yeah, it's a process.
Cool. Anyone else? I'll add one last one. So we've talked about protein, carbs, fats, and you've put out a lot of numbers out there. No, obviously it's quite individualized, but is there a way that we can track our foods without necessarily measuring or weighing every meal that we eat?
Yeah, I think one way that's out there, I don't know if you're leading to anything, but my idea is like a portion plate, essentially. I don't know if there's one you're thinking about. Really easy. So if you've had a low training day, so I think of 3 different kind of portion plates. If you've had a low training day, or it's the evening after a moderate session or something, You might have like 50%, so half the plate looking like veggies. You might have then a quarter of the plate looking like carbohydrates. If you're in a deficit, you could change that to none. And then a quarter of the plate looking like some protein source. And then if it's been a moderate day or a moderate time of the day around training, you could do thirds. And then if it's been a super, super heavy day, kind of your days, you might even need more than this, you might do half the plate looking like carbs, half the meal, so a quarter of the meal protein and quarter veg. And then
You can send out a bit of a diagram or a picture if you guys aren't visualizing.
Yeah, it's like, I don't know how to say that. Yeah, so that's an easy way you can use as well. Yeah. Were you hinting at anything? Did you have any ideas?
Yeah.
What ideas are you thinking?
The portion of plates,
Okay.
but also no, also using like hands, like as a guide as well. In terms of like you saying like protein serves, like one serve of protein, like what does that look like? You know, if you've measured before, you'll if you've weighed your foods, you have a bit more of an understanding of, okay, this amount of chicken is roughly 20 grams. But if you've never done it before, is it like, you know,
Yeah.
you can say one protein serve is like a palm size or...
Exactly, yeah. So you can do that. You just then have to know how many serves to do. Some of you might need 3 protein, maybe not 3, but you know. So 100 grams of protein is roughly your palm, 1 cup of carbs, roughly a fist, and then like a tablespoon or 20 grams is roughly a thumb. But it does depend on your requirements of fat, sorry. Does depend on your requirements how many of them you might need per meal too. So that's in the plan when we have your serves, they're usually based on that. And then you can be like, oh, quite sweet, 4 carb serves. Oh man, I'm really stuffing this up. 2 carb serves, you know, 2 fists or whatever. Yeah.
Cool.
Awesome. Cool.
Yeah.
Prepackaged new food meals. Do you have an opinion on them?
That's a yes.
No, I don't know. Like I use them in meal plans. It depends again on your requirements. Like a lot of them might be quite low in veggies or quite low in carbs or even low in protein. You just have to look on the back and be wise about what you're choosing. And I think it does, then you need to know your requirements to be able to then choose those meals. Like some clients, I get them to have one of them for convenience and then add a brown rice cup to it. Or add a little steamed fresh thing of veggies. Or I'm just like, they're probably not going to suit your requirements. Let's see if we can make super easy ones. I think we're so busy, so they're super easy. If we can get into the habit of prepping food, I think it's a skill to be able to create your own, but some of our lifestyles, it just doesn't work. So I'm not for or against, it just depends. You need to know your requirements.
Thank you.
Yeah, cool. Thanks so much, guys. I appreciate you coming out and probably ran over time.